Hello, beloved listeners, wherever you are finding or listening to this interview. I want to say before we even begin that this is one of the most heartfelt and deep-hearted experiences I've been through, and you'll see why shortly. This is such a powerful and blessed conversation. Really honored that you're here, and of course, with every interview, but especially this one, our hope is that your heart is opened, that you are reminded of who you really are, and the connection that you have to yourself and to all of us. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Daniel Friedland. Today, we have the honor and pleasure of getting to really connect with Dr. Danny, is what he is. How he's known, at least in my world. If it's all right, I'm going to just refer to you as
100%.
awesome. Dr. Danny is the author of Leading Well from Within, a neuroscience and mindfulness-based framework for conscious leadership. He has served as the CEO of Super Smart Health, the CEO of Super Smart Health. He is a masterful coach, has given keynotes, workshops, worked with high-performing leaders. He also has an expertise in publishing one of the earlier textbooks on evidence-based medicine, which is the way that all of healthcare providers are now trained to make medical decisions. So amazing. He has worked with Fortune 500 companies, hospital systems, been very involved with conscious capitalism, and he also has served as the founding chair of the Academy of the Integrative Health and Medicine and the co-chair of the San Diego chapter of Conscious Capitalism. And so huge heart for serving and for consciousness and for integrative medicine, which is near and dear to my heart. I do want to share, it's very important to know that Dr. Danny was diagnosed on November 12th in 2020, so recently, and he was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. It was a grade 4 glioblastoma. I don't think I didn't say that right, but I will let Dr. Danny tell you more. Of course, I'm definitely not a doctor. I was like, oh, I don't know how to say that. What I think is really the important piece about this is that this diagnosis has catalyzed a brand new level of growth and awakening into conscious leadership during this challenging and evolving and awakening time. We're going to go deep into that, what that's looked like. What I think is incredible is that Dr. Danny and his family, his wife Sue and their son Zach and Dial are making meaning on this journey by sharing his experience and day-to-day experience and journey through YouTube, through a channel on YouTube, which we're going to have the link. It's Living Well from Within, but we're going to have the link in the show notes so that you can subscribe. And honestly, it's becoming like a Netflix series. You don't want to miss it. And every day he's documenting his open-hearted experience. It's really beautiful. And I think part of this desire to share what he's going through is really to share firsthand the experience of evolving, the drama, the transformational lessons, the open-heartedness, the conscious shifts, and really from such an authentic place. I also want to share that Dr. Danny and I met originally through the Exchange community. Exchange is just a beautiful training and facilitation community that is all about infusing appreciative inquiry and heart-centeredness, heart math, and really leaning into strengths. And I'll just say, Dr. Danny, you right away when we met, I was like, who is this bright light? Like you just really right away, I was like, oh, I feel like a kinship, like we're in this family together. And so I just honor you. I'm so grateful you're here today. This is, you have a lot of bravery and courage, and it's just from my heart to yours and everybody getting to tune in. It is a gift to be here to share you and your story and evolution.
Oh, Julie, I so appreciate you. I so appreciate you.
I'm so honored. I think, one of the places to start, because we had talked a little bit beforehand, this podcast, the interviews I do, this whole idea of being your You-est you, it's, I think it really gets to the question of like, who are you at the core of you? Like what is that authentic, who is that most authentic aspect of you? And maybe just to start with sharing how this journey, being diagnosed in November with stage 4 brain cancer and documenting it, and just knowing you and talking to you a little bit, how you're maybe tuning in or coming even more close to that core of who you are, what that means to
Mm.
you. Just kind of start there.
I think that, wow, we could start there and actually take the entire interview. Maybe we
Yeah.
spend a few weeks on this.
Yeah. So this will be right. Just start with that question. No biggie. Yeah. I just go right to the deep end of the
Well,
pool.
but let me say, I just want to start out with appreciation for you, and shine a light back on you, because when the moment I met, I remember it was in Cleveland, and we were walking back from the museum, and I felt your radiance. There's something about the way you show up energetically, with just radiates love, and you come from this place of essence. And you've got the book behind you, Get a PhD in You. And this is, and then you speak about the sacred, the work that you're involved in. I just am so in awe of your work, and to be able to spend time, meaningful time together in service of your community, is really a gift. And so this, at the end of my introduction in Leading Well from Within, I actually share a personal vow. And my personal vow is, I vow to live my life from home. When I get lost, find my way back stronger, and inspire others to live from home too. And that's and when we talk about home, and you're talking about your you-est you, there's a rich language around this. So we could ask the question is, what is the core of you? What does it mean to live from home? And it gets into other, I'm a physician, and I'm also part of, have been served in leadership in the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine. And so these are, deep questions of, and usually when I actually start my healthcare talks, I ask the question, what is the root of the word health? What is the root of the word health? I don't know if you've ever thought about that, if that's something, and I will share with you that less than 5% of healthcare providers know the answer to that. And we work in healthcare. And it doesn't come from Latin, it doesn't come from Greek, it actually comes from Old English hail. The root of the word health is wholeness. The root of the word health is wholeness. And then when you look at the root of the word patience, the patients that we are, that does come from the Latin patiens, which means to suffer. So patients suffer from fragmentation of mind, body, and spirit. And the role of the healer, the same root word, is to help remind individuals of the essential wholeness they already are. Yeah. So we were all born with the birthright of your you-est you, which is grounded in wholeness, which is fundamental to mental health and well-being. We were all born with this inalienable sacred right, all essentially children, however you want to express it, the children of God in the force field of miracles, we are grounded in the fabric of the you-est you, or wholeness. That's our foundational state. And a lot of this work is the work of reminding ourselves of the essential wholeness we already are. It's not even about becoming whole.
Yeah.
And I think that's the value of what you offer to your community. You perhaps are not teaching anything new as much as you're reminding people of, all of these podcasts that you do. They're reminders. They're reminders to say, I'm coming back home. I'm coming back home. I'm coming back home now.
Mm. I'm just taking a moment to take that in. It's so powerful what you're saying. It's exactly right on. Well, and what it insinuates is that there's nothing that you need to do. It's already within you. It's, as you said, that sacred birthright. And I think just really getting that, that reminder is so important, because it's very easy to forget, and it's very easy to believe it's lost or not there. I'm actually curious what home feels like and looks like for you as you move through this journey. How that's shifting. What does that feel like, look like? I know we were talking a little before. It was so beautiful how you were talking about it, and maybe just to share with everyone how that's changing and what you're learning and noticing.
Yeah. So it's so let me just start out by talking about what fragments, and then we'll come back to kind of what integrates. So you're talking about this fragmentation and integration. And so in the neuroscience of this, I talk about how the brain is mapped against Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
The fundamental thing is our brain is built for safety first. The foundation of our brain is safety first. These are the most powerful circuits in our brain. And then we actually have circuits of, love and belonging in the middle of the brain. And then it's more, this is an oversimplification. It's a conceptual model. Right. And then you've got your circuits, your higher cortical circuits are the circuits of where you engage with significance. And ultimately, it's your higher brain, the neocortex, which is your seat of conscious awareness, that integrates every level below it. So there's prefrontal cortex. So there is an integrating function, but then there's also this sense of fragmentation that can happen when demands exceed resources. When demands exceed resources in our lives, and you were thinking about where we are in the time of COVID right now. Yeah. Just the additional demands that are layered on. And then there's systemic racism. There are so many our brothers and sisters that are suffering. The demands exceed resources. And what can happen then is you can go into a reactive mindset, and your brain goes into a survival mode. And that experience can be fragmenting. So I just want to kind of mention that in the context of what I'm about the story I'm about to share, in terms of how I found my way to a place of integration. So on the night that I got the diagnosis, I want just to paint a picture. I do coaching, and I was coaching a client on November 12th. And all of a sudden, I had word block. I couldn't get my words out, and I was embarrassed. And I've never had that happen on a call. And we were 10 minutes in, and I couldn't get my words out. And he says, "Are you okay? I think you need to go be seen." And I said, I think I need to be going. And I went into Scripps emergency room, and because I'm a physician, I'm an internist, and I came up with co-created a plan to get an MRI. And long story short, the MRI came back as saying I had multiple lesions in my left part of my brain cancer. And at that point, we were talking about, is it metastases or is it aggressive primary brain cancer? Neither of which are, So the powerful thing is that in that morning, I was the picture of abundant health. And there's a certain integration that comes from that. There's a certain kind of a sense of wholeness that you have from that. But by that evening, I'd walked through the door of cancer, and I didn't only walk through it alone. I took my whole family with me. And there was that intense grief response, that them first learning the news. Then I was admitted to the wards by myself because of COVID restriction. And I only slept an hour that night. And where my brain went, it went into that reactive, the default setting. Again, the brain is not built for joy or fulfillment first. It's built for safety first. So mindlessly, the questions were going through, which was, what if this is a catastrophe? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my family? And I noticed, I have a mindfulness practice, and I could see my brain doing its best to protect me from harm. And those questions, David Cooper-Rido founded Appreciative Inquiry, which the exchange community is it's gifted his wisdom, and they've taken that knowledge base further. Says questions create worlds. Questions create worlds. And the questions we ask is the difference between, are we going to engage in a world of suffering or a world of flourishing? And I was lying in the bed, and my default was these questions were taking me in to these automatic these automatic survival questions were taking me into a world of suffering. And I was feeling fragmented by them. And then miraculously, I found the generative question. I found the generative question miraculously, because I could see it. It was my mindfulness practice that really helped me not get swept away, but to be able to simply observe with curiosity and actually some compassion. I didn't go to war with my survival brain. I didn't push it away. I said, well, thank you for looking to protect me from harm. So I actually was able to integrate that and then nest that with understanding that it was doing its thing. It's got a role to do, and it was doing its job. So I didn't go to war with myself. I was able to actually kind of pivot and actually say, would it be possible for me to ask a better question? And the question that emerged, and questions have altitude. And if you get a generative question of sufficient enough altitude in thin air, what happens is it yields a cascading answers question, and it will touch down in your life into something meaningful and pragmatic and impactful. And that's what happened for me. That's what's happened for me. So the question at altitude, I want to invite all of you listening to imagine what that would have been like for you that night if you had noticed you had just been received this life-threatening diagnosis. And for me, it's this diagnosis, which is terminal brain cancer. Theoretically, from here on out, I should have 15 months to live. I anticipate living longer than that with everything I'm doing.
Yes.
But that's imagine you're lying in the bed and these fear-related thoughts are spiking. What generative question would be helpful to you? What generative question would be helpful to you? And the question that miraculously emerged for me is the question, what matters most now?
Oh, wow.
What matters most now? And cancer is my challenge, but it's no more important than the challenges you're all having, in whatever challenges you're facing during this time of COVID, and, whatever challenges you're facing. There may be other disease challenges. There may be business challenges. There may be different existential challenges. Whatever those challenges are, they're no more important or less important than any of the challenges that any of us have. They're our challenges, right? They're your challenges. They're sacred in many ways. And they're here to actually offer us the ability to learn from those challenges. That's the beautiful thing. And so the generic question that we could always ask at any inflection point, that question is a question of purpose. What matters most now? And that's a high altitude question. In fact, Julie, we've learned that in the framework of exchange and appreciative inquiry, that's a foundational question. It's a question of purpose.
Yeah.
So when you put a question of purpose, that's a high altitude question. What matters most now? When life is running short, when life is potentially shortened, the only answer that makes sense that came back to me is when I asked what matters most now.
Yeah.
The only answer that made sense is make every moment count. Make every moment count. And the beauty of actually, I'll tell you, the blessing of getting a diagnosis like this. I used to be fearful of a diagnosis, but I don't have any fear. I have appreciation, because so many people are getting plucked out by COVID or tragic accidents.
Yeah.
They don't get a chance to prepare and make every moment count before they die, to have the opportunity for this quality of awakening.
Yeah.
So I've been gifted with this period to take my awakening to the next level, because I'm very intentional in making every moment count. And then the question that naturally results from that answer. So high altitude question, what matters most now, yields an answer, make every moment count. Then it leads to a next question, which is a very simple question. How?
Yeah.
How? And I've got two answers back on that. The first, and they're very much related. The first answer I got back on that was live intensely loving relationships. Live intensely loving relationships. And in relationships, in my work, I talk about this difference between a reactive mindset and a creative mindset. And the reactive mindset is fragmenting. Oftentimes, even though it's designed there to save our lives, it can feel fragmenting. And what happens is, because we're wired to connect, when we not only experience reactivity in isolation, we experience it in relationship to others. We're in cycles of reactivity. And when you have those cycles of reactivity, our reactivity is socially and emotionally contagious. So we're not only in a time of COVID contagion, we're in a time of social and emotional contagion.
Yeah.
And that cycle of reactivity is fight, flight, trigger, fight, flight, trigger. So if you're experiencing edginess from fight and flight behavior, you're triggering others. They're going to amp up their fight and flight reactivity. They're going to trigger you further, and around we go. We're in a cycle of reactivity, and that's very fragmenting. And yesterday was I'm mindful of what happened yesterday at the Capitol, and just that shows you how contagious this can be. On the flip side of that, there's a cycle of creativity. What does that more integrated cycle look like? And it's a cycle unlike fight, flight, trigger, it's a cycle of receiving and giving with each other. Essentially, receiving and giving love with each other. Receiving others with empathy, understanding, and giving with authenticity and care. And so when I asked how, live intensely loving relationships, make every moment count by living intensely loving relationships, I'm essentially asking the question, how can I receive others more fully and give with them and give to them more fully at every touch point, in life? And actually, this aspect of giving and receiving love, it's multidimensional. It's really talking about how do you live a loving life?
Love that.
How do you live a loving life? There are dimensions of this. There are, what's our relationship to God, or whatever you describe as your deeper source of inspiration? How are you in the giving and receiving of love in the field? How do we actually, because what I've experienced, the more I love God, and actually I use the term interchangeably as the field. Interestingly enough, my wife uses the word force. So we've come up with the integration. We're living in the force field. And she said, well, that sounds like a superpower, like a Marvel's character. So we came up with, we're living in the force field of miracles, and our children were born into that force field. They were our miracles. And now and I'm having such a density of synchronicities happening. What I'm experiencing, this force field, I'm experiencing it as conscious loving energy. So the more I give love, the more I express love for this mystery, the more I'm blessed in terms of what I'm receiving back in terms of immense synchronicity. Yeah. Blessed synchronicity. And then taking that into my every touch point of relationships. We're in a cycle of receiving and giving love with each other right now. And by extension, I can feel you listening. I can feel you listening. I don't know you, but I do know you. I do know you. There are no strangers in my life. There are no strangers when your heart is broken wide open. Yeah. There are no strangers. Every touch point, every moment that counts, every touch point, I have been nourished. I've been very intentional of making every moment count, every relationship, every touch point, every moment. So my family, I've a depth of love I've never experienced for my wife. The tenderness, the depth, the way our family is growing closer together. And that extends to, I have no strangers. I'm getting my radiation therapy, and I want to bless people. I want to bless other cancer patients there. I want to bless. There's a woman, Marina, who is part of environmental services, and she provides a warm blanket. I get a warm blanket every time I lie on the table to get my radiation therapy. And when I met Marina for the first time, I asked her what she did. And she says, I stock the linen, making sure you have a warm blanket. And I said, I wanted to tell you how that's made such a difference to my day. The work that you're doing here makes a massive difference. I want to thank you. And she was just so touched. But she matters. She matters. And, ultimately, if you're working with teams, if you're working with a team and you can feel, when we talk about the brain being architected against Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the questions that you want to ask for your team is, how can I help you feel safe? How can I make you feel, that you're part of the community? How can I make you feel like you matter? And that's that's being very intentional about being in this sense of how do you cultivate the cycle of creativity when we're in relationship of receiving and giving love, receiving others with empathy, understanding, and giving with authenticity and care. And this is not always kumbaya. It's being able to sometimes talk truth to others, but in a way, by skillful means, give with authenticity in respectful ways that people can hear it. So my heart has been broken wide open. So what this has done for my awakening, it's taken the book I wrote, Leading Well from Within, is a science and practice of conscious leadership. And there's a certain kind of, I always imagine a certain part of that awakening was wisdom. There's a certain dimension. What I imagined awakening to be was about mindful awareness and about, being an awakened leader is about being aware of the influence you have on others. Leadership's an act of influence. Leadership's an act of influence. And because we're wired to connect, we cannot not have influence. So the awakening of conscious leadership is, what kind of influence am I having on my environment? Am I showing up with positive influence or negative influence? Fundamentally, am I showing up as a demand for somebody, or am I showing up as a resource for them? So there's a certain kind of like a wisdom that comes from that. And I thought that, kind of this awakening was, almost primarily the wisdom dimension, which is a certain kind of a headiness, if you will.
Yes.
And what I've discovered in my second part of awakening, I'm discovering that actually the power of conscious leadership is more fully leveraged when it's also connected to an awakened heart. And what's happening right now in terms of being able to engage in relationships, I'm also mobilizing a coalition of healing through this Living Well from Within channel. And you'll see how that unfolds. I want to shine a light on everybody else. So Julie, I've got this playlist and unfolding playlist, and it's going to be such a blessing for me to share the awesome work that you're doing in the playlist. So that's going to be on your day 52 or day 54 right now.
Amazing.
In the playlist. So what's happening is when people hear about my diagnosis, because I've been blessed to serve in multiple ecosystems. I'm in the exchange ecosystem, but I'm also in the conscious capitalism ecosystem, and I'm in the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine ecosystem, and I'm in the Global Wellness Summit and the Global Wellness Institute. I've cultivated many loving relationships, and now there are a lot of people that are heartbroken to hear I have brain cancer. And it's open, the beautiful part of a broken heart is that it's an open heart. And what naturally happens is there's an awakening of compassion in that. And when I want to receive the compassion that people are sending my way, but I only want a portion of it. I only want 5% of it or less, because I'll take that, drink that in with as good medicine. But more importantly, what I love about this people being brokenhearted, it's that they're having awakened compassion in my presence. And then I get to say, please keep 95% for yourself. Please keep 95% for yourself, and first radiate that into your life, into yourself, as self-compassion, wherever you feel you need healing. And then from that place, bring that compassion back out into your families, whether at home or at work, into your communities and into the world at large. And because of that, people are awakening and they're wanting to be a part of this healing coalition. So that's the second part of my awakening. The first part is kind of like the conscious leadership, the mindfulness, the mental aspect of this. The second part is the heart of it. And then there's a third part. The third part is I've come to an understanding, just even when I watch the unfolding playlist, and there's now 130 videos in the playlist. I'm watching this as much as a viewer, as a participant. I'm watching these videos unfold, and I realize that it is not being directed by me.
Yeah.
This is an unfolding cosmic script that demands. I'll give you a small vignette. On day 13, I was getting into the rhythm of getting up and setting my intentions and actually manifesting those intentions within 2 hours. I set my intention, and I was that day I was going to speaking to. I've got 4 coaching clients that day, and my first coaching client was I coach Alexander McCoben, the CEO of Conscious Capitalism, on his conscious leadership, and I've been doing that for a number of years. So I was about to pitch Alexander on an idea. I'd seeded him, and this was because I'm part of a mastermind and in this conscious capitalism space. So this is, by the way, conscious capitalism is like companies like Starbucks, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Best Buy, Patagonia. They've all come together. These organizations have come together to actually ask the big question: how do we elevate humanity? They run off these 4 tenets: higher purpose drives, and it's all stakeholders being accounted for. Then it's conscious leadership that drives conscious culture and a thriving environment. And so I was about to pitch to Alexander that because we've been in this, I was in a senior leadership network, that we've been talking about how many of our kids are lost because they're going through the time of COVID. It's like very, very challenging times.
Yeah.
And there's just a book that was published, Conscious Capitalism for Kids. So I was going to pitch to Alexander that it's time for the founding of the teen chapter for Conscious Capitalism. And I knew if I had pitched it, I had a sense if I had pitched it, he would have thought it was a good idea. But he would have said, probably it's a great idea, and it's not the time for it right now. We've got a lot of things, other things that But when he heard that I had cancer, his heart broke open. When I shared with him that the other question that after the revelation was, one stream was what matters most now, live intensely loving relationships, how, giving and receiving love. The other part B to that was live more fully the legacy of my work. And he understood this importance of legacy for me. And that's what this YouTube channel has become, an enduring part of my legacy. And I have him on day 13. We recorded a session where I pitched the idea of the founding chapter of Conscious Capitalism, the teen chapter of Conscious Capitalism. And then my son, Dylan, who is 16 years old, I asked if he could be the founding chair of the chapter. So, and Alexander has fully embraced this idea, and I'm introducing him to Dylan. First time he met Dylan on that video. And Dylan is now the founding chair in name only. Then what happens that same day, I get the call that my final definitive biopsy results are ready to be shared. And up until that point, I'd been in kind of a blissful kind of, I knew that I had primary brain cancer rather than metastases, but the worst case scenario was grade 4 glioblastoma, but there were also other possibilities that would have given me a better prognosis and a brighter, so-called longer future. And so I'm driving over in the car, and I'm having fear spikes because I know I'm getting a test result. And you can imagine, we've all got test results back, school, but this is like a test result that's going to change my life.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in the room. I'm sharing this on. You can see me driving over in the car, and then I'm trying to settle down in the, in the patient room. And even though I started settling down, my heart rate's going at 100, and then I'm called back into Dr. Malone's office, and he's an extraordinary neurosurgeon with a tremendous bedside manner. And here we are he let Sue record the interaction with him giving me my diagnosis. And it was grade 4 glioblastoma. And then we got home. I walked through the door. I went into an intense grief response. And Sue and I are just like walking back, shell-shocked, and just trying to process this news. We're in the stage of denial, and we walk in, and our kids are waiting for us. Zach and Dill are standing in the kitchen as we open the door. And they asked, "Did you get good news?" And we didn't have to answer because they just took one look at our faces, and they went into, "Oh, no, no, no." They went straight into their grief response. And for like an hour, we sat around the table, the kitchen table, trying to process our grief. And we were running these rapid cycle experiments, where I was trying to activate my heart of compassion, the heart math thing, and kind of radiate that into my being. And I just was looking for energy shifts. What was helping the energy expand? Actually, one of the things that really helped me find some comfort is just the phrase, "It is what it is." I could just really it helped me get a trace of acceptance. But for Dylan, he would say, "Dad, none of the stuff's working for me." And he grabs his phone. He says, "I'm going to go shoot a video." And he goes up to his room. And it's this video on day 13 that is the most extraordinary video. He starts out by talking about the pain he's going through. And then he starts out by saying, "I'm thinking about committing suicide. I just don't know if I can handle this pain." Starts there. And then what happens as a miracle, because he said his brain was empty. There was, by the grace of God, he found a metaphor. And it flowed through him. And the metaphor he found he said that it was the metaphor of being in a movie. And he says, I feel like I'm sitting in a movie, and this sucks. I'm in the worst part of the movie. It's got a 0% Rotten Tomato scores. And then he points upwards. He says, "I have no control how this movie is running. There's somebody in the box up there." He says, "I think it's God. God has control over here. I don't know how the movie's going to end, but what if it gets better? What if the movie gets better and I check out too early?" And then he changes his mind midstream. He says, "What if this movie gets to like 50 or 60% Rotten Tomato score?" And then he says, and then he parenthetically says, "I'm going to stick around because my dad makes movies that are 100% Rotten Tomato scores." He says, I've decided I'm not going to check out. And I'm thinking about that video needs to be watched by every teenager in the country or around the world who has especially, I'm thinking, how many teenagers did he save who were thinking of checking? And in January this year, or January 2020, 1 year ago, my brother's son, Ben, shot himself to death. He was like 22.
Oh my gosh.
So we went to the funeral. We were shell shocked. He shot himself to death. He didn't give himself a second chance. It was impulsive. And I wondered, what would Ben have done if he had seen that video? Would Dylan have been able to save his life? And so what happened was, now I understood there's a third part of my awakening. I watched the sequence of that unfolding. The way that Dylan was gifted with being the founding chair of conscious capitalism, in name only in the morning. Then he goes through this intense grief response as the result of me having the gravest diagnosis possible. And then by the end of that evening, he claims the embodiment of conscious leadership as a teenager. He manifests. So then I understood that I am called to have this diagnosis. The script demands it. And so that's moved me into the third part of my awakening, which is the third part of my awakening is a full spiritual surrender. I am now in my deepest form of servant leadership. Beforehand, I thought servant leadership was serving others, but ultimately it's serving God first. And so I am here in my deepest form, and that for me is this surrender. I haven't surrendered to just, I'm doing everything I can do to stay around as long as I can. So I haven't surrendered to giving up. I haven't given up at all in terms of my healthcare, but I've complete spiritual surrender to knowing that whatever I'm called to do in service and whatever will unfold is God's will. And that's put me into my full awakening. So my full awakening is I have a mental wisdom, I have an awakened heart. And my third part of the awakening is a full spiritual awakening of being in service of it. And this has brought me to a place of what I would describe of being fully at home, what you might be described as being your You-est you. This grounded, I feel like I'm in the full bloom of my life, and I'm so blessed to feel I've been gifted. I actually feel blessed by my cancer, and I'm not thriving. I'm in the full bloom, feeling more intensely alive than I ever have, feeling more grounded, feeling more contented, feeling at home, as at home as I've ever felt, as fully integrated as I've ever felt. And it's not in spite of my cancer, it's because of my cancer.
Wow. Just take a breath. Very, very beautiful, powerful. What you just shared, Dr. Danny, you were saying this, and what's coming forth for me is there are people that have lost their lives to COVID, to accidents that didn't have the chance to evolve in this way. I think it's unbelievably powerful, beautiful, that what you have studied your whole life is now, it's so fascinating. You're in this space of full on openness, open-heartedness in what's emerged. It's such it's almost a paradox, and it's not. It's like the and is what I'm hearing, to have this diagnosis and for it to be the gift. And so the full blooming and blossoming, this, awakened wisdom, awakened heart, full spiritual surrender, the most grounded you've ever felt in yourself. And seeing it as the full bloom, and because of your diagnosis, I mean, all that comes to me is like, what incredible enlightenment. And people often get through life and don't get this opportunity. And your courage, your openness, that you keep asking those high altitude questions. And what I'm hearing is like, you're getting the highest altitude responses in living.
So I just want to kind of just share with you, because some people are going to be thinking about like, is it just that I'm trying to be positive? Is it just that I'm trying to,
Yeah.
and I want to just kind of just share why this is effortless. There's another dimension to this, why this is effortless.
Yeah.
Like when you arrive at your You-est you, there's a certain challenge that you might be striving towards that. And sometimes the striving can actually preclude it because we get into a certain expectation. How should I be?
Yeah.
And there's a certain kind of a place where this awakening arises from that's different. So what the foundation of this is, it actually goes to what Einstein said that the biggest question we could ask ourselves is fundamentally the question, do we live, and this is like another high altitude question, do we fundamentally live in a friendly or a hostile universe? Huge question.
Yeah.
And what I have been experiencing with all of these synchronicities, I am truly experiencing this force field of miracle as conscious loving energy. The foundation of this, the fabric of our universe is conscious loving energy. And so when we get stressed, when there's a corruption, we actually get into kind of like, we create hostility. But the fabric, I truly believe the fabric and the foundation is conscious loving energy.
Yeah.
And so what's actually, John did this beautiful, John Berghoff, founder of Exchange, for us on the inner circle, he did this beautiful, he showed us Otto Scharmer's theory U, and he asked the profound question to us on the downside, what needs to die within you so something new can be born? And what came up for me when we were in that exercise was actually what's dying for me is the fear of death itself. So, and it's not only physical death, it's actually psychological death. I don't have any fear of self-doubt like I had. I mean, when you're talking, I don't have any fear of physical death right now because I feel like I'm in this field of conscious loving energy and I have nothing to fear because ultimately when the flesh melts off my bones, I will be in this field and that's where my kids will find me. That's when that's where I will always be. So what I've got curiosity about, and that when you trust that you're in this field of conscious loving energy and that you were born in this wholeness of that, all we have to do is open. We don't even have to try to bring love into our life. All we have to do is to open our hearts to this field. And when we do that, we actually are we're instantly connected to our essential wholeness, the You-est you. Without having to go through this contorted of striving, what do I need to achieve in my life to get to this place? No, it's open here and then manifest from this place and you will achieve more than you ever thought you could. So I'm having this interesting experience now with, in who is my You-est you, because I'm 2/3 the way through my radiation therapy. So just want you to kind of get a sense that when your fear of death, your parts of your physicality, your physicality is dying, or your fear of your living invalidation, your psychological death, you lose the fear of both, living death and physical death. What results is a birth into this full flourishing life. That's what naturally what you're born into, and that unfolds. So I'm having an experience right now of an experiment. I'm actually beginning to lose function. I'm losing my hair from the radiation therapy, and I'm losing some of my cognitive ability. I'm feeling this fogginess, and yet I am still feeling this grounding. I still feel at home, even when I'm losing function. So that you might want to actually say, well, what happens to our experience when this bleeds away? When I finally make my ultimate transition, what does our you-est you look like? What becomes of that conscious experience? What a delicious exploration. So I'm having the blessing of actually being a living experiment in that, where I'm in this full awakening as things are dropping away right now.
It's so profound, Dr. Danny, on every level. It's exquisite. It's something you were saying, what I'm really hearing, you've let go of all of the striving, pushing, contorting, trying. And what you're left with is that full integration, that full alignment. You could call it the force field of miracles. I think of it as pure positive energy, the universe, the fabric of love. And it's like blowing my mind. I actually usually say glowing my mind instead of blowing my mind. It's glow, because words are so important. Like, it is actually glowing my mind. Like, it's a mind glower, because what I think this is the question we all ask ourselves. And it's without that fear of death, what I'm hearing and getting is it's allowing you to, even as your physicality shifts, changes, drops, you lose that. What I'm hearing and seeing and feeling, and I hope if you're watching this, you can see this, because you can see the light that's pouring out of you, is that what's left, it's like the question of who is home, what is home, what is the you-est you? It's without physical form. It's always there. And this is what I felt with you when we first met. And this is the piece that I'm hearing. It's like that essence of you that is infinite is just beaming out of your whole being. Yeah. It's wow. It's really, before this conversation is such a gift. And your courage, your willingness, your curiosity, the consciousness at which you're coming into being with what's going on, is something that is an inspiration to me and to anybody that's listening right now and that's watching and that's part of this conversation. And I'm going to make sure all these questions, as you were saying, it's about your journey, and then you, the listener, like taking these questions and really sitting with this question of who is your you-est you without your physicality, what matters most, and then really listening to your heart like you've been doing. So thank you for being just a champion of authentic, just fully unshackled, open-hearted. I just see this just heart beaming light, like complete force field, love, miracle energy, just really embodying that.
So I would like to end with appreciation, firstly for you, Judy. This work that you're stewarding in the world, it's so cool. I mean, we're coming to this conversation asking the big questions. And we're asking the big questions because when we lead well from within, from your you-est you, we claim that integration, the transformation for ourselves, mostly only so we can give it away. So how do we actually can think about how do we inspire others around us, and how do we elevate others and show up as fuller resources? So I just so appreciate the powerful ripple of social contagion that you have. That's so needed at this time. And then I want to just really acknowledge want to come back to this, the mysterious, the source of inspiration. I just want to kind of, just call into being, this loving energy, whatever the mystery is, so that we can really be present with it and feel this life we're blessed to live. And then I just want to, thank you for listening. It is just such a joy to be with you, and to know that, for you to know that if you're connecting and resonating with this, that this all already lives within you. There is, I just also want to say that, some people, the danger of, of people hearing about me being awakened. I just want to make sure that, nobody kind of views me as a guru. that what my big message over here is, part of the corruption is when this gets politicized. So people say, like, I've had this powerful experience, you need to come through my pathway to get access to the field. I just want you to know, each of you listening, you've got direct access to this field. You don't need any intermediary. I mean, if you want to go through a church and you find deeper meaning in that as a community, God bless you as well. And I want to just there are so many portals for you to gain personal access to this, to your connection in your life.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling inspired right now, I want you to sense, because I'm channeling from the field, you're being inspired from the same place that I'm being inspired from. And I wish you well on deepening into your journey at this time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Danny. What beautiful words. This is the reason I do this show, is you just did it. And just for reminding everyone watching, and I love what you just said, this all lives within each of us in our own unique way. And thank you for being a blessing in my life and every single person here that is getting to know you or does know you, and for just showing up fully open-hearted, authentic, and so full of light.
Love you.
Love you.